Again, good afternoon. So I think we'll just kick it off here, and then as people filter in, we may restate some of the sort of timely agenda items if that needs to be restated. But anyway, great to have you in the room. I'm here joined with Sarah Fitzgerald. Sarah's with the marketing team, and a big thank you to that team, both Sarah and Olivia Soriano, for helping put this together. And so what we're going to do here is go through some of the key points in terms of standing out in the insurance space. The fine print is winning with in-market consumers, and we've got a fairly packed agenda here. So understanding your audience, positioning in the marketplace, overcoming industry issues, and then finally we'll go through a case study of Nationwide. So just recapping the 4 primary agenda items that we'll go through, and it's going to be fairly quick. There's lots of information here, but I think you'll find it very, very interesting. And just before we jump into the agenda, let me take maybe 30 seconds to do a quick commercial for YouGov. So some top line numbers here. The only 2 things I'd like you to sort of take away from this is the number 2000 and the number 3000. 2000 is the year of the founding of YouGov, which really starts for You Govern, based out in the UK, listed on London Stock Exchange. We're about $1 billion in market cap. We've been doing this for nearly 2 decades, and 3000 are the number of clients we serve on a global basis. And so the data we're going to be talking about here, and really much of what powers our conversations with the 3,000 clients we speak to, is largely derived from syndicated surveys. So we reach out to 7 million people on a continuous basis globally, 2.4 million in the US, making us the largest consumer insights firm in the world. And those brands that our panelists interact with provide us with real-time analytics on the 2,000 brands that we cover. And so, there's a really rich amount of information that we can provide to our clients. We layer the brand tracking on with a demographic and psychographic segmentation to sort of round out what we call our syndicated platform, which is the plan and track. And so what you're seeing on this slide, the YouGov plan and track, is our syndicated platform. It's largely sort of works through 5 buckets or 5 work streams: identify, describe, target, and then the measure and evaluate. The agenda that I've got here planned will largely sort of stick to these 5 buckets. And I think as we talk through the specific items that I've got to share with you, I think you'll understand the sort of flow of how the product can inform your marketing objectives. And so with that, the very first objective, understanding your audience, right? Discovering when, where, and how to reach consumers. And so defining the target market is probably one of the marketer's most important tasks. It is the foundation of all the elements of your marketing strategy, from how you develop and name your products or services, right through to the marketing channels that you use to promote them. So here's a hint before we dig into it. Your target audience is not everyone. Your task in defining your target group is identifying to understand your particular niche so you can dominate that. And so what you're seeing here in terms of looking at the 3 funnels, the New York loyalists, the New York Life cheaters, and the New York Life rejectors, is essentially, we can understand specific target markets to respond to different ways to your brand. And so in this example, what we're showing is there's a specific set of the market that will always be loyal to the New York Life brand. They're actively loyalists, they're tweeting, they're commenting, they're reviewing the brand, and they're actively promoting it within their network. And so those are the New York loyalists. When we go to the middle graphic, the New York Life cheaters, these are also the target market that's largely aware of your brand, but they're also aware of all the other sort of names in that space that New York Life occupies. And they're fairly agnostic, right? So they'll passively stay with New York Life, but if there's a better deal to be had, they'll move over to State Farm, as this example shows. And then finally, the rejectors, no matter what you do, very, very tough to win them over. They seem to be sort of firmly stamped on the other side of the table, so to speak. So as you think about your target market audience, you're keeping in mind these specific buckets, but you're layering on a lot more detail. So here's where plan and track really informs the marketing decision, because the more clearly you define your target group, the better you can understand how and where to reach your best prospects. You can start with broad categories, such as, for example, millennials or single dads, but you need to get much more detailed, as this graphic shows, to really achieve the best conversion rates. And I would say, don't be afraid to get really specific. It's all about targeting your marketing efforts effectively, it's not stopping people from buying your product. People who are not included in your target market can still buy from you. It's really important. What's really key here is that while you can't target everyone, you can sell to everyone. And so again, speaking more to the granularity of what your data should help you achieve, once you're happy with your creative, it's really time to start thinking about the social tools to find out where your target audience spends their time. Is it online? Is it network, TV? Is it print media, right? And so you need to reach them where they spend their most time, right down to the program level. And so this is the power of having a really intuitive tool to inform your strategy. So as you get more granular in your media analytics, right down to the program level, revisit your audience research. The results of your test may provide additional insights that you really didn't have when you first started this exercise. So be sure to incorporate any lessons you've learned, revisit your target market regularly, and make sure it still accurately describes the audience that you most want to reach out to. Now, so this is largely sort of completing the identify your audience discussion. You can recycle this exact same exercise to expand and find new opportunities, and that's what we're going to talk about in terms of untapped markets. So what we're seeing over here is splashed up in a bubble chart, the domestic airline sector, right? So a co-branding partnership and the way it's going to deliver new opportunities to you, essentially, it's an alliance between two organizations that benefits both brands in terms of marketing, brand awareness, perception, lots of the sort of top line brand health metrics, right? So if you think about those successful partnerships that have worked, that resonated with the wider audience, think of GoPro and Red Bull, for example, for the adventure seekers. Think of Taco Bell and the Doritos for the couch potatoes, right, amongst us. Think of Nike and Colin Kaepernick, one of the more recent examples that sort of shook up that space. So you start by identifying brands or individuals that perfectly reflect your organization, your social characteristics and traits that you broadly want to sort of advertise or draw to your brand. What we're looking at, again, just to clarify, in this bubble chart, the x-axis is reputation, the y-axis is awareness, and then the size of the bubble, the y-axis is impression, and the size of the bubble is awareness. The very top orange bubble is Southwest, so congratulations to them on getting very high up on the reputation and the impression scale. On the very bottom bubble is Spirit Airways, so some work to be done there. Solidly in the middle, but with a very sort of large bubble is United Airlines. So we'll sort of animate this discussion using the United Airlines brand. And as we dig into, again, recycling the exercise of identifying who the audience is, right? Make sure you research your potential partners thoroughly, because your customer base will associate your company with the partner company. You don't want any surprises regarding what they stand for. Look for example, strong brand and core values that align nicely with your own brand and core values. Organizations that attract a similar audience. And the important thing to remember is not who that brand is trying to target, but who that brand is actually successfully attracting to their brand. So you may very well find that the audience that the brand is targeting is not the target market that's most responding to the brand. And so in this specific slide, who exactly flies the friendly skies? Well, they decidedly more male in terms of gender, skews towards the higher income bracket. And so those green arrows that you're seeing are the ones that this target market oversamples versus the nat rep. And the blue arrows pointing down is where they undersample versus the nat rep. And so, the location-wise, the target population for the Friendly Skies, the United Airlines passenger, comes less from the south, more from the northeast, Midwest, and the west. So, this is how you build and layer on additional sort of demographic, psychographic data to understand who exactly is that brand partner. And then at some point, you'll have to try to understand any existing predispositions for brand affinity. And so what we're seeing over here is those that are looking or considering specific insurance brands, State Farm, Geico, Allstate, I'm just naming the first three, their consideration for the insurance brand, and then within those brands, who are the ones that are considering flying with United Airlines. Again, we're looking for natural affinity so that when you are striking that co-brand partnership, the friction for establishing that relationship is greatly reduced. So, case in point, State Farm, 31% would consider flying with United Airlines. That's a really easy conversation to have. On the flip side, USAA, 15%, right? Clearly, it's still a good number, but almost half of where the State Farm number is. Now, it could be that USAA, based out in San Antonio, is established in the South, and maybe that some of that comes through in terms of who the customers are that considers flying with United Airlines. Remember, in the previous graphic, we noticed that the people that fly the friendly skies are based less so in the South, which is exactly where USAA is based out of. So I want to sort of circle back to some of the top of mind successful partnerships, and we talked about Nike and Colin Kaepernick to demonstrate the potential sort of branding that you can draw from a very successful association, right? So here, during what was a fairly controversial time, Nike struck a partnership with Colin Kaepernick, and that's really in keeping with Nike's tradition of taking a stand in social issues. And what you're seeing is we knew that the awareness would fly through the roof, but how exactly does that convert to marketing ROI? Meaning, how does that convert to purchase intent? And what this chart shows is that, in a fairly crowded market, in a highly contested sort of time, this is the back to school period, September the 3rd, kids are going back to school, they're picking up those new sneakers, they're looking at all the brands, Reebok, Puma, Adidas, Under Armour. Nike's awareness actually translated to a much higher purchase intent, solidly sort of expanding their gap between themselves and the other competitors in the space. So, a very successful association and partnership that even in a very mature market, such as the sneaker industry or the athletic apparel industry, set Nike apart and really delivered those exceptional sort of marketing returns. And so, I think here we're talking about positioning being very, very strong, and that sort of leads us as a nice segue to the next agenda item, positioning yourself in the marketplace. And, quite frankly speaking, the line was drawn in the sand way back in 1971 when David Ogilvy took an ad in the New York Times saying, times have changed. We just crossed the era of advertisement essentially embracing the moving image, right, because of the sort of wide adoption of TVs, and we're now going to solidly how the brand is positioned in the marketplace. And he went on to say the most important decision in the results of your campaign depends less on how we write your creative and much more on how your product is positioned, right? And so with that in mind, you understand exactly who's responding to your brand. It's really important, and maybe even more so important, to understand how your peers are doing in that market space, right? So understanding your competitors, are they going after the same market? Are they having greater success in going after specific segments that you too are thinking about? How are they positioning themselves? Because keep in mind, in the audience's mind, they're not thinking of you in silo, they're thinking of you versus your peers, your reputation, your brand, your awareness. All of that is essentially a moving target because you're being compared to the very best player in that industry. So, for example, in this specific slide, we've sort of thrown on the wall a number of sort of players in the PNC and the life and health space. Allstate, number 3 on this chart, actually does pretty well in terms of ad awareness, right? But in terms of moving the decision through the purchase funnel, the number 4 brand, State Farm, does a better job at converting the awareness into consideration and purchase intent. And that's really key here because in fact, they're getting a much better return on their marketing dollar. Geico and Progressive, which are the number 1, number 2 brands, have largely executed a strategy on snaring passively loyal customers. And this is something we talked about at the inception of this discussion. Those that are very actively loyal and those that are passively loyal to a brand. So Geico and Progressive have made it easy to do comparison shopping, make it easy to switch from brand to brand. They're giving customers a reason to leave, not excuses to stay with their existing brand, right? And so as we remind ourselves of the traditional sort of linear purchase funnel, it's awareness, familiarity, consideration, purchase, and loyalty. Now that you've got mobile, you've got an enhanced digital experience that all of these brands are building up very, very quickly, you have that same purchase funnel has become very, very permeable. And so when you think about initial consideration, active evaluation, moment of purchase, and then post-purchase evaluation, another brand can come in and insert themselves at anywhere in that funnel, right, and really accelerate that decision criteria. So some brands are extremely strong in their initial consideration. What we're finding is, what our research is showing is that your marketing dollars can give you the best returns when you target in-market consumers. And so let's move on to the next slide and actually animate that a little bit more. Reasons to advertise to the in-market consumers, and I'll start from right to left over here. So the right bar charts show when your policy is coming up for renewal, how active or inactive are you in searching for a better deal. So this is data coming back from the respondents, those that are in market, and that's the purple bar, versus those that are not in market, are actively looking for better deals. They're shopping, for better rates. They're doing their due diligence, and so it's an exponential sort of difference between those that are very active, shopping for deals. They're the ones that are driving the prevalence for switching. Now, moving over to the left, that's another interesting story. The question is, which of these following policies, insurance policies, do you have? Those that are in market, which is the purple graph, are underinsured for auto insurance, health insurance, home insurance. So you've got almost a perfect sort of trait here. They're more prone to switching, and they're underinsured, meaning they're better served by your products, right? What a great audience to target market to. And so this is exactly the kind of people you need to find a way to sort of shake up the purchase funnel and insert yourself in that consideration conversation. Moving over to the next slide, we can dig into this a little bit further. So we're again going to speak about in-market and ad-aware consumers. And I want to use a specific example. I don't want to be general about this. So we'll continue using, for example, in this case, AIG to animate this discussion. And while we're talking about in-market consumers, there are a number of other business critical audiences that you can also run analytics against. And that's on the right-hand side. So exploring AIG consumers, those that are considering switching, former customers, those that are considering AIG very highly prioritized in their purchase funnel. Those that are actively sort of watching networks where AIG advertises themselves. These are all business critical audiences that can provide really strong intelligence into your marketing strategy. And so switching back to the left, in market, that audience is decidedly younger. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the ones who are using online reviews or who are comparing prices, right? That graph that represents the AIG ad aware, while they are not necessarily as young, the fact that it's become ubiquitous, that brands have made it very easy to do online shopping, very easy to do comparisons, very easy to sort of look at side by side, what do they have, what do we have? I think many, many more shoppers will sort of predispose themselves to use these online tools. So, we don't necessarily want to limit ourselves to thinking that it's the very young or the millennials are the ones that are actively using digital engagement to inform their decisions. I think that's largely a notion that's antiquated. That's probably 2 years old, and we can very easily sort of expand those descriptives to include the 18 to not just limit to 44, but expand that out to to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? So because the shopping experience has gotten much easier. So continuing the conversation, digging into the in-market insurance crowd. Again, what we're looking at over here for AIG. There is a statistical significance when you think about accelerating their ability to make a decision, having the ability for the advertisers to position a brand so that you can guide them through that decision process. So what we're seeing over here is that those that are in market are much more aware of AIG in terms of their buzz score, positive recommendation, consideration, positive reputation. All of those items are critical in terms of driving the final and ultimate sort of the ultimate goal in pulling the trigger towards subscribing to the product. So here the comparison is the general population to the in-market audience. I want to dig into this a bit more, right? So the hypothesis is, if you're in the market, you're more aware of the brands. Well, what if we move that a little bit further and say, what if you're aware of AIG and you continue to receive additional sort of advertising? How does that impact the way you think about AIG and moving towards the purchase funnel? And we're again seeing over here is that in comparison to the in-market versus those that are aware of AIG as a brand, it's an exponential increase in terms of advertising impacting their ability to sort of influencing that ultimate decision, right? So positive buzz, exponentially bigger, reputation exponentially bigger, consideration in current customer, right? Much higher scores. So the bottom line here is increasing advertising to those that are in market, but also more importantly, identifying those target audiences that are aware of your brand and targeting those folks really delivers the highest return on investment. And so how are you reaching these consumers? Well, it's across the board. It's a fairly rich and robust strategy that we think works, right? So it's billboards, it's the common areas such as public transportations, it's the sides of buses, and as mundane as media and magazines, but it's also, last but not least, emails, right? So it's again, the digital channels, it's social media, it's mobile applications, email, web, so on and so forth. SEO, search engine optimization as a strategy really works over here. Ideally, if you've got the budget, you can employ a multi-channel strategy and communicate a rich, memorable story across many of these channels and sort of layer on additional information to your target audience. But the key here is building that story, using a narrative to connect your brand to customers with a focus of linking what you stand for to the values you share with your customers, right? And that really prompts our next agenda, which is, how do you position a menu of services to an audience when they can easily be sort of consumed with too much information, right? You really don't want to be transactional, but at the same time, you want to get out there the message of all the services that you provide, whether it's auto, home, travel, and so on and so forth. So if we had to define one specific goal for a marketer, it's really to reach the consumers at the moment that most can influence their decision. And so what that essentially requires when we're talking about overcoming a key industry issue, which is not saturating the marketplace with too much information to your customer, the key here is telling a story, right? It's being consistent in your message. It's articulating why you're there, your brand story, and why it matters and why it resonates with your target audience, right? And so I want to use these two examples to sort of animate the discussion, targeting your outreach, and maybe here we're talking about life and health companies as an example. So we'll use two personas, persona 1 and persona 2, and again, just reminding us of the traditional funnel, which is largely linear, awareness, consideration, purchase intent. This is a much more complicated storyline, right? It's less linear, it's less transactional. It's much more complicated because it speaks to an emotional connection that you want to draw. McKinsey calls this a consumer decision journey. And in this example, the two personas, let's call them emergence guidance hunters. The very young person that's just recently graduated from college, having always been financially prudent, has indicated that entertainment is important. He or she likes to get advice from professionals, and social media informs my decisions. That is also shared. Those sentiments are also shared with persona 2, a young family, perhaps 1 or 2 children, fairly young. They also are financially prudent. They think about where they spend their money, and they've indicated Spotify is their preferred streaming app. Again, we're building a profile of the target audience, and the reason why here is not because we're simply doing a pulse ad strategy or an ad campaign. We want to sort of understand their lives and their life stages, because when you understand those life stages, you can make yourself present and be ready to offer services at the moment of their decision, right? So the persona 1 and persona 2, the emerging guidance hunters, their journey involves taking advantage of technology. They're going to evaluate your products and services very actively. They're going to add and remove choices over time, right? And includes a feedback loop where they're going to recommend certain brands and they're going to pan certain brands, right? And so as these two personas keep evaluating products and services, it is up to you as the brand to continually be top of mind to give your customers a reason of why they should buy your products and services, and really essentially a reason why you exist, why it matters, right? And be consistent across all communications. And perhaps one really good example of a brand that we partnered with in doing storytelling really, really well is Nationwide. And so maybe we can sort of round this discussion out with a case study in Nationwide. And just before we jump into it, I want to sort of circle this discussion by bringing it back to how we started. So it largely talked about using the syndicated platform to plan and track, and the 5 work streams: identify, describe, target, measure, and evaluate. We've largely gone through the identify your target market, describe who they are, target where they spend their time. And so we're now going to spend the next few slides and the next few sort of comments thinking about the measure and the evaluate portion of it. And so again, we're thinking about Nationwide. The campaign that they launched was called The Jingle. They were targeting the 18 to 44-year-old, which they termed the emerging guidance hunters. And they used our tracking platform to largely understand and quantify the success of the campaign. And so there are these top line numbers. So, in their mind, the campaign was a success, and it was easy to understand that in terms of just raw numbers: 1.1 million views, comments, and shares, right? So these are just general impressions that are easy to sort of talk about. But how does it compare versus, the prior year efforts, right? Nationwide has been doing this for quite a while. The Jingle has been a consistent theme for nearly 40 years. And so how do we sort of shake up what could be a fairly sort of, stale campaign and actually move that needle a little bit higher so that ad awareness and general awareness of the brand sort of bumps up? And so what you're seeing over here in the bar chart is our ability to track pre-campaign, both the ad awareness and awareness, largely the same, right? And then in the linear charts, we were able to track the Jingle campaign at the inception of August through the duration till December. And again, we're targeting 18 to 44. They're in market for insurance, which is essentially a proxy for the emerging guidance hunters. We used daily brand health metrics to track this group throughout the duration of the campaign. And as you can see, from 2017 to 2018, there was an appreciable difference in both the overall awareness of the brand and the ad awareness of the brand. And keep in mind, when you increase the ad awareness of a brand, you're accelerating the purchase funnel, right? And that's really key, and that's exactly what this campaign hoped to do. But more importantly, right, again, I want to underscore the importance of having daily brand health metrics. This is another chart that, once again, the red line denotes exactly when the campaign started. That's the Jingle session from August to December. And we're tracking it throughout the duration of the campaign. What you're seeing over there in the green versus the, I don't know, is that turquoise or teal, is the Nationwide brand increasing their buzz, which is a sort of a sentiment score that tracks social media, it tracks word of mouth. So it's essentially sort of, have you heard positive things about our brand in the last 2 weeks? You're seeing Nationwide capture positive scores versus the P&C sector, the auto and home sector, and that largely increased as we moved from August to October to November and so on. So, a really good, successful campaign strategy based on daily brand metrics. But wait, when you look at September, that's a bit of an anomaly, right? So there you actually see the buzz scores drop for Nationwide, where it largely sort of stayed stable for the P&C sector. So what goes over there? Well, it turns out that Nationwide in September suspended their Jingles ad campaign because of the impending Hurricane Florence that was coming into the Northeast. And so they refocused or repositioned their ad to cater to their existing customers and make sure that they're fully prepared for any sort of pending increase in traffic in terms of disaster relief and activity that the insurance brand would have to sort of cover. And so Hurricane Florence largely sort of passed through the Northeast without very much damage. The Jingle campaign was reinstated, and as you can see, the great comment here is that there was a sustained sort of halo where Nationwide was able to capitalize on, and the buzz score tracked that with, again, an expanding presence that they commanded versus the P&C sector. And so I think this is probably a good time to sort of summarize what we've gone through. Understanding the audience, we've recapped that in stating that that is probably the foundation of your strategy, really understanding and building up a very accurate portrait of who it is that you want to target market, being sure of the position of your brand in the marketplace relative to the other brands, because you've never seen in isolation, telling a story and weaving the narrative through the life stages of your clients and customers is the most enduring way to get lasting sort of return on investment, and then finally the nationwide study. So, you know, the bottom line is there's a ton of data that's available, probably more data than most businesses know what to do with and marketing teams know what to do with. But if the data is accurately interpreted and effectively deployed, it can lead to new opportunities. Thank you very much. I'll open it up to questions. Oh, and let me make one more comment. If we were to navigate back to the peer slide, that's slide number 17, the peer rankings. And so I talked a little bit about Allstate being successful in ad awareness, where State Farm found interesting ways to convert their ad awareness to consideration at a much higher clip. So we've actually explored that in really good detail, in great detail, with a white paper that we released earlier this year. So it covers consideration, it covers loyalty, it covers switching prevalence, and it covers that for the PNC space. So I would urge you to sort of raise your hand, indicate interest. There's no charge for that, so we'd be happy to send that on to you. Thanks, Sarah. So I was reminded that if you did have any questions, feel free to type that into the question box, and we can take that. Yeah, if there isn't any questions here, feel free to reach out to me directly via email. That works just as well. Well, perfect. If there isn't any questions, we can wrap this up. Hopefully you found this informative, and if there is some follow-up questions, again, I'll remind you of my contact details, Matthew Varghese at yougov.com. There'll probably be a follow-up email that our marketing team will send out to you that will provide the deck that we went through as well. So, with that, Sarah, I think we can wrap it up. Folks, thanks again for your time, and we'll catch up via email. Take care now.